Hello everyone, welcome back. Up to this point, we have been working with GPIO pins, light up LEDs and detect button presses and interrupts. But in almost every embedded project we build, there comes a point where our microcontroller needs to talk to something else. It could be a sensor, it could be a display, it could be a memory card. It could be another microcontroller. Or maybe it is something much bigger, like an Ethernet network. And the way these devices talk to each other is through communication interfaces. So, in today's lecture, I want to give you a complete picture of the communication interfaces. Then in the upcoming lectures, we will take each interface one by one and go into the details. First, serial data interfaces. Let's start with simplest serial interface, UART. UART stands for Universal Asynchronous Receiver Transmitter. The most important word here is asynchronous. That means there is no shared clock line between two devices. Imagine we have device A and device B. Both devices have a UART controller. Inside device A, the CPU may have a complete byte, for example, 8 bits available in parallel. The UART controller takes those 8 bits and convert them into a serial stream. Instead of sending all 8 bits at once, it sends them 1 bit at a time. The stream comes out through the TX line. It travels to device B's RX line. Device B's UART controller receives those bits and convert them back into parallel data for its CPU. And the same thing happens in the opposite direction. Device B can transmit through its TX line and device A can receive through its RX line. Because both directions can operate independently, UART is a full duplex. You will find it in Bluetooth Wi-Fi modules or PC terminal outputs. Now let us move to USART. USART is closely related to UART. In fact, the data transfer mechanism looks very similar. The major difference is that USART can operate with a shared clock. So, now we have a clock line in addition to the data lines. Both devices use that clock to synchronize their timing. One note here, ESP32 do not have USART. Now, let us look at SPI or Serial Peripheral Interface. SPI is also serial, but unlike UART, SPI is synchronous. That means it uses a clock, and SPI is master driven. The master generates the clock and controls when communication happens. A typical SPI communication has 4 main signal lines. The first one is SCLK. That's the serial clock and it is generated by the master. Then we have MOSI. MOSI means master out, slave in. This is the line on which the master sends data to the slave. Then we have MISO. MISO means master in, slave out. This is the line on which the slave sends data back to the master. And finally, we have SS or CS, which means slave select or chip select. This line is normally active low and it is used by the master to select which slave it wants to communicate with. And of course, the device shares a common ground. One important feature of SPI is that it is full duplex. The master can send data to the slave, while at the same time, the slave sends data back to the master. Both sides shift their data using the same clock. That's what makes SPI very fast and efficient for many peripherals. Normally, we talk about 4 signal lines plus ground. If there is only one slave, the slave select line can sometimes be omitted, giving us a simpler 3-wire arrangement. You will see it in LCD, OLED display and various other sensors. Now let us move to I²C. I²C is quite different from SPI in terms of topology. Instead of several separate chip select lines, I²C uses only 2 signal wires. One is SDA, which carries the data. The other is SCL, which carries the clock. and multiple devices can share these two wires. Each slave has its own address. So the master can essentially say, I want to talk to the device with this address. Another important feature of I²C is that the SD and SCL lines are open drain with pull-up resistors. That arrangement is what allows multiple devices to safely share the same bus. I²C communication happens in defined sequence. We start with a start condition, then we send the slave address. Typically the address is 7 bits. After that comes the read-write bit. A 0 means write and a 1 means read. Then we have an ACK, where the receiving device confirms that it received the information. Then the actual data is transferred, typically 8 bits at a time. And after each byte, we get another ACK. Finally, we have the stop condition. I²C can support multiple masters and multiple slaves. But even though many devices can be connected to the same bus, only one conversation takes place at a time. That's the key idea. You will see it in temperature sensor, humidity, pressure, light and motion sensors and various other sensors. We will see demo of some of them. Next we have I²S or inter-IC sound. Unlike I²C and SPI, I²S is defined specifically for digital audio. The basic interface has three important signals. The first is SCK or BCLK, the bit clock. Then we have WS or LRCLK, which tells us whether the current data belongs to the left audio channel or the right audio channel. And finally we have SD or the serial data line, which carries the actual audio samples. Depending on the application, each audio sample can contain 16, 24 or 32 bits. The important point about I²S is that it is designed to simply stream audio data. There is no device addressing like I²C. There is no acknowledgement mechanism like I²C. It is essentially a simple synchronized audio stream. Now let us move to the interfaces that are used for higher bandwidth communication or networking. Let us start with EMAC. EMAC is the Ethernet MAC controller inside the MCU. Its job is to handle the MAC layer of Ethernet. But the EMAC does not directly drive the Ethernet cable or the RJ45 connector. Instead, it works together with an external PHY or physical layer device. So, think of the data path like the CPU creates data and stores it in memory. The EMAC uses DMA, direct memory access, to read that data from the memory. It then builds an Ethernet frame. The frame contains things such as the destination MAC address, the source MAC address, and length or type fields, and payload, and finally a CRC. The EMAC sends the frame to the external PHY using an interface such as MII or RMII. The PHY then handles the physical Ethernet signaling and connects towards the Ethernet connector. On the receiving side, the process happens in reverse. The PHY passes the received data to the EMAC. The EMAC checks the CRC, filters frame based on the MAC address and uses DMA to place the received data into the memory. It can also generate an interrupt to inform the CPU that data has arrived. So the important concept here is MAC handles the Ethernet MAC layer while the PHY handles the physical layer. Next we have TWAI. TWAI is expressive name for the CAN interface. CAN is very common in automotive and industrial system. The physical bus uses two differential lines, CAN H and CAN L. The reason for using differential signaling is excellent noise immunity. If external noise affects both wires in a similar way, the receiver can largely cancel out that common noise. CAN has two important bus states. The recessive state represents logic 1. The bus is essentially idle with both lines sitting around the same voltage. The dominant state represents logic 0. In the dominant state, CAN H rises while CAN L falls, creating a differential voltage that the receiver detects. CAN is used extensively in automotive, industrial automation and robotics. So whenever you think about robust communication in a noisy environment, CAN is an important interface to remember. Now let us look at SDIO Slave. Here ESP32 acts as the slave. That means an external host controls the communication. The host could be another MCU, an SoC or even an FPGA. The main signals are clock, CMD and data lines D0 through D3. There is also an interrupt line that the ESP32 can use to notify the host. The most important thing to remember is the ESP32 does not start the transfer. It waits for the external host to communicate with it. One possible application is using ESP32 as a Wi-Fi or Bluetooth coprocessor controlled by another processor. Now let us flip that situation around. With MMC Host, the ESP32 becomes the host. It can communicate with an SD card, an eMMC device or an SDIO device such as Wi-Fi modules. The signal set is similar: CLK, CMD and D0 through D3. We can also use a 1-bit data mode when required. But the important difference is the direction of control. Here the ESP32 starts the transfer. So remember the distinction: SDIO slave, ESP32 waits for the host; SDMMC host, ESP32 controls the transfer. Typical application includes data logging, camera storage and communicating with external SDIO devices. Now we come to the third major category. These peripherals are not primarily about moving structured data between two devices. Instead, they work with raw electrical signals, and they do a lot of this work directly in the hardware. The advantage is that the CPU does not have to constantly generate or monitor every individual pulse. Let us start with PCNT. PCNT stands for Pulse Count Controller. Its job is very straightforward. It counts pulses. Imagine we have a rotary encoder. Every time the encoder produces a pulse, the PCNT hardware detects it and updates a counter. The CPU doesn't have to sit there counting each pulse manually. PCNT can count upward, it can count downward, and it can also count up or down depending on a directional signal. It can respond to rising edge, falling edge, or both. It can also have upper and lower limits. And we can configure watch points so that the hardware generates an event when the count reaches a particular value. For example, imagine an encoder that produces 1000 pulses per revolution. If we configure the high limit to 1000, then reaching that count can tell us that one complete revolution has occurred. PCNT is therefore useful for things like rotary encoder, flow meter, tachometers, distance measurement, and frequency counting. Next is LEDC. LEDC is the LED PWM controller. Its main purpose is generating PWM signals. PWM stands for pulse width modulation. The basic idea is very simple. We generate a digital signal that switches between high and low. By changing the percentage of time the signal remains high, the duty cycle, we can control things such as LED brightness. So, for a LED, a higher duty cycle generally means more brightness. LEDC has multiple PWM channels and allows us to control both frequency and duty cycle. There is an important trade-off here. As we increase the PWM frequency, we may lose some duty cycle resolution. One nice feature is that PWM generation happens in hardware. So once it is configured, the CPU doesn't need to continuously toggle the GPIO. Typical application includes LED dimming, RGB LED control, buzzers and tone generation. But when we move from LEDs to actual motor control, we normally want something more specialized. And that's where MCPWM, motor control PWM, comes in. MCPWM is specifically designed for motor control. LEDC is a general purpose PWM peripheral. MCPWM is designed with the requirement of motor drivers in mind. One particular important feature is complementary PWM output with dead time insertion. Why do we need dead time? Imagine we have a high side switch and a low side switch. We never want both switches to turn on at the same time. If they do, we could create a direct short circuit through the power stage. So, MCPWM inserts a small delay between turning one switch off and turning the other one on. That delay is called dead time. So, when you are dealing with actual motor control, H-bridge, BLDC motors, or position and speed feedback, motor control PWM becomes much more appropriate than a general purpose PWM peripheral. Finally, let us talk about RMT, remote control peripheral. RMT originally came from its use as a remote control or infrared peripheral, but it has become much more general than that. RMT is useful whenever we need a very precise timing of pulses. The interesting part is that RMT does not simply store bits, it stores symbols. Each symbol contains two things, a signal level and a duration. For example, we could say high for 0.4 microseconds, then low for 0.8 microseconds, high for 1.6 microseconds, and so on. The duration of these pulses is what carries the information. This is exactly the kind of timing used by infrared remote control protocols. And once again, the big advantage is that the hardware handles the precise timing. The CPU doesn't have to sit there doing the microsecond level counting. So let us look at the complete picture one more time. We started with the basic serial communication interfaces. UART gives us asynchronous full duplex communication. SPI gives us fast synchronous master-driven full duplex communication. I²C gives us a two-wired shared bus where multiple devices can communicate using addresses. And I²S gives us simple synchronous stream design specifically for digital audio. Then we moved into the higher bandwidth and network-oriented interfaces. EMAC provided Ethernet MAC functionality and works with an external physical layer PHY. TWAI provides CAN communication over a robust differential bus. Then we looked at the two SD-related modes. With SDIO Slave, the ESP32 waits for an external host. With MMC Host, the ESP32 becomes the host and starts the transfer. And finally, we looked at the peripheral that deals with signals rather than data transfers. PCNT counts pulses, LEDC generates general purpose PWM, motor control PWM provides specialized motor control PWM, and RMT generates and receives precisely timed pulse sequences. The important thing is that when you see a requirement, you should start thinking which peripheral is appropriate for this job. Need to talk to a simple external device, maybe UART, SPI or I²C. Need digital audio, think I²S. Need Ethernet, think EMAC and PHY. Need automotive or industrial communication, think TWAI, the CAN bus. Need to count pulses, think PCNT. Need PWM for an LED, think LEDC. Need proper motor control PWM, think MCPWM. Need precise pulse timing, think RMT. In the next lecture, we will take one of these interfaces and go much deeper. So, that's all from this lecture. See you in the next lecture. Thank you.